A week after I installed all the equipment, I received the first video evidence. I ended up going to Oklahoma City to set up the server and knew I'd be there for a couple of days. The kids were at my parents' house, so Jolene was on her own. Shortly after I left, she called Steve and arranged for him to come over. I called from my hotel in Oklahoma City and spoke to her briefly, just to let her know I was there for her. She said she loved me, but by that time, I didn't care anymore. After that call, I logged into my home server and waited. Sure enough, around 9 o'clock that night, they were in our bed, doing the dirty deed. Naturally, he didn't use a condom, which really annoyed me. Worse than watching the two of them roar like animals was what I heard them say, I muttered. Following the conclusion of the court proceedings, the jury was dismissed subsequent to the delivery of closing arguments by both the defense and prosecution. Given the lateness of the hour, approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the judge directed the jury to return to the hotel where they had been sequestered for the duration of the 2-week trial, which marked the culmination of nearly a year-long investigation. The defendant was escorted back to the Tarrant County Correctional Center in Fort Worth, and until reconvening on Monday, no further developments occurred. Thus, I opted to stroll back to my accommodations at the Hilton Garden Inn in downtown Dallas, making a pit stop at a nearby bar for refreshment and sustenance. While enjoying my meal and drink, I suddenly caught wind of a feminine voice behind me. "Hey there, cowboy, care to buy a lady a drink?" she inquired. Turning to face the speaker, a sense of recognition washed over me. "Ashley? Ashley Marks, is that really you?" I questioned. "Indeed, it is," she affirmed, her smile possessing an undeniable charm. Motioning for her to join me, I signaled to the waitress. "Goodness, how many years has it been? 16, 17? I pondered aloud. "I believe it's been 17, she confirmed. Ashley, along with Steve Jenkins and Jolene Carter, had been among my closest companions during high school, collectively known as the Four Musketeers. However, our paths diverged when Ashley's family relocated to Austin during our senior year, severing our contact thereafter. "I've been keeping busy," she shared. "Attended the University of Texas, graduated, tied the knot, untied it, and now find myself working as a journalist for the Austin Statesman. Fascinating journey you've had. What led to the change?" I inquired. She shrugged, her expression tinged with resignation. "Marriage," she remarked, the word carrying weight. "Unfortunately, my ex wasn't particularly committed, or perhaps just had a selective memory when it came to vows. After catching him in infidelity for the 3rd time, I decided enough was enough and showed him the door," she recounted. "Last I heard, he was managing a McDonald's down in Beaumont." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "I know what it's like, believe me." "So, what brings you to the Big D?" "I've been covering the Jenkins trial for the last couple of weeks." "What a mess." "The other day, I watched you testify," she said. "I feel very sorry for Jolene. Whatever her faults, she didn't deserve to die this way." I didn't say anything to that. No, Jolene didn't deserve to die like that. I would have preferred something more torturous, like burning at the stake. But that possibility, like so many other things, had been taken away from me by the man I'd once considered my best friend. "So, how are you doing, Bill Jennings?" she asked, interrupting my train of thought. "About as well as expected, considering the last 16 years of my life have been a total sham," I said. "At least you have kids," she said. I nodded. "Yeah, I guess so," I said. "They're mine, at least legally. You may not be a donor, but believe me, you are their father in every way that really matters," she said. "You're probably right," I said. "But it still doesn't make me feel any better." "Look, I have a confession to make," she began. I looked at her, wondering what she had up her sleeve. "You know every reporter in this courtroom is going to want to know your story. I'd like to be the one to tell it, if that's okay with you," she said. "I know you probably have a lot of trust issues, and I totally understand. But no one knows you like I do. Look, if it helps, we'll sign a contract." You give me exclusive rights to your story, and I'll protect you from the wolves, kind of like a publicist. I'm not publishing anything without letting you see it first. My editor has already approved it, and I want it done right." Deep down, I knew she was right. Reporters from every major news outlet in the country, CNN, Fox News, Associated Press, you name it, I've even been contacted by a few small but well-known bloggers. It was all so overwhelming. Something told me I could trust her, so I made up my mind. "Okay, Ashley," I said. "You've got a deal. So, how exactly does this happen? Do we do it here, or do we move it to my hotel room or yours?" I asked. "Well," she said, "I've wanted to see the old homestead for a long time. It's only 2.5 hours west of here by car. It's still pretty early, and the jury doesn't start deliberating until Monday morning, so we have the weekend off. Why don't we drive back, and you can show me where all this happened? You'll give me the details on the way, and after we get there, I can talk to your kids and parents, if that's okay with you." I thought for a moment before agreeing. It would be a nice break from the trial, and I thought it would be nice to show Ashley around the neighborhood and maybe repair the relationship. "Sounds good," I said. "Where are you staying?" "I'm at the Hilton around the corner." "What about you?" she asked. "Same thing," I said. "Do you want to grab a couple of things first before we hit the road?" she asked. I nodded, and we agreed to meet at my truck in the parking lot. "You can't miss it," I told her. "It's a big blue cab." "It's still the same, Bill. He's got to have the biggest pickup truck in the state. Give me about a half hour after we get there so I can change into something more comfortable and grab a few things, okay?" she asked. I agreed, and we hit the road. The sun had already dipped below the horizon when we pulled onto Highway 20 leading towards Abilene. I was glad for that since I hate driving in the sun. Ashley had changed into her professional reporter's outfit and was now wearing a knee-length denim skirt and a white Western-style blouse. She seemed as beautiful to me now as she had in high school. I also got a good look at her shapely legs and felt a familiar stirring below the waist. She smiled. "I know what you're thinking, cowboy," she said. "Really?" I asked. "You're thinking something along the lines of why didn't I sleep with Ashley and not Jolene?" I laughed. "Is that what your honed reporter's instinct tells you?" I asked. "No, the way you check my legs like you did back in high school," she said. "I bet I thought I'd forgotten about that." "Legs like that are hard to forget," I told her. I always liked looking at her legs, especially when she was wearing her cheerleader uniform. She smiled and pulled out a tape recorder. "So tell me, Ashley, is there a Mr. Right anywhere in Austin?" "No," she said. "Since my divorce, I've focused almost entirely on work. As you can imagine, I've had a lot of trust issues with men, and so far, I just haven't met anyone I really want to spend time with." "Sorry to hear that," I said. She laughed. "Somehow I doubt it," she said. "Damn those reporter instincts anyway. What do you say we start this little road show?" "Yeah, okay," I said. She put her recorder on the dashboard, making sure it wouldn't fall off. "You don't mind if I write this down, do you?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not at all," I said. "I want you to do it right." I took a sip of my coffee and thought for a bit before I started. "Ashley, as you know, Stephen, Jolene, and I were very friendly in high school. After you left, it was mostly just the three of us. I asked Jolene to marry me right after graduation, and she said yes. Steve and I both joined the Marines right out of high school. We both went to San Diego for boot camp and even ended up in the same platoon. Jolene and I agreed that we would get married after I finished my training. After boot camp, Steve and I broke up. He went into the infantry, and I went into computer electronics. He was assigned to Camp Pendleton, and I was assigned to Quantico, Virginia. Anyway, about a month or so later, Steve hurt his knee badly and ended up getting a medical leave of absence. You'll notice that he still walks with a slight limp. Couldn't they have given him a desk job? Asked Ashley. No, it doesn't work that way, I said. Everyone in the Corps is a basic marksman, regardless of their MOS or specialty. Even clerks and computer guys like me have to meet the physical requirements to participate in combat. Steve came home, and his father pulled strings to get him into the county, right? His father was a county commissioner, wasn't he? Asked Ashley. I nodded. Yes, until the day he died. That's how Steve was first elected. I guess the voters thought highly enough of old man Jenkins to elect his son. I graduated, came home, and got married. Steve was my best man. I found out later that he was also Jolene's best man, if you know what I mean, I said. That scoundrel, Ashley said. I ended up on the West Coast, and almost 9 months after we were married, Brian was born. About a year later, I was sent to Okinawa for a year, unaccompanied. We came home for a month, and I let Jolene and Brian stay in my house that I had inherited from my grandparents. We decided it would be easier for them if both of our parents were around. After that tour, I came home, packed up Jolene and Brian, and we headed to my next duty station, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Just under 9 months later, Jessica was born. Jolene took the pregnancy hard and insisted that I have a vasectomy. She argued that if we ever wanted another child, I could always have the surgery reversed, and I agreed. Although if I had known then what I know now, things would have been very different. Looking at the pictures, it's easy to see Steve's traits in the kids, Ashley said. Didn't you notice it when they were born? That's a pretty fair question, I said. You might remember that when we were younger, people often said that Steve and I could pass for brothers. We have the same hair color and the same eyes. Hell, we even have the same earlobes. No, they both looked a lot like me when they were little, and they both have their mother's eyes and nose. It wasn't until they got much older that I started to notice the resemblance. When we get to my house, you'll see baby pictures. Anyway, I finished my service in the Corps, and we all came home. Dad took me to his computer store and introduced me to all the other guys. I went straight to work for him, which was great. Unfortunately, I had to do a lot of traveling to do that. Did it ever bother Jolene? Ashley asked. I shook my head. No, just the opposite. She seemed to enjoy my customer service and networking. Dad got clients in Dallas, Abilene, Wichita Falls, Amarillo, everywhere. Heck, we even had clients in Houston and Oklahoma City. Jolene thought it was great that I was building such a large client base, I said. In fact, my absence gave her all the time she needed to bring Steve into our home and into our bed. Of course, I found that out much later. You mean she actually did Steve in your marital bed? Asked Ashley. Yeah, all the damn time. I said, that's why I burned it in the mattress after she got shot. I don't blame you, Ashley said. I burned a few other things too, like the couch and chair Steve used, I said. Jolene's wedding dress burned too, Ashley wrinkled her nose. So Steve was a regular guest at your house? Ashley said. Yes, so much so that he even had his own chair. I didn't mind at the time, since I considered him a friend. He'd come over to my place, especially on Sunday after church. We'd start watching the game, and he'd almost always fall asleep in that damn chair. The kids also started calling him Uncle Steve, almost at Jolene's insistence. It annoyed me at the time, but now I know why. Hey, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't mind warming up my coffee. Are you ready for a pit stop? I asked. Ashley turned off the recorder. Sure, she said. I could take a smoke break if that's okay with you. I nodded and turned toward the next exit. After taking a break from the road, we were back on the highway heading towards Sabine. Ash pulled out her voice recorder and set it on the dashboard. So all this time, you had no idea Jolene was cheating on you with Steve? She asked. No, I guess I was the typical clueless husband. She never disrespected me, at least to my face, and there was never even a hint of sex in the house when I was away. I guess they've been pretty careful over the years, I said. Did you find out? She asked. About a year ago, I was sent to Los Angeles for a month-long training course on an ERP package we were contracted to support for a San Antonio client. Jolene and the kids did a great job of emailing me and calling me every day. One weekend, I got an email from Brian. Jolene and Steve had taken the kids to the lake to fish, and he had caught a pretty big bass, and he sent me a picture, I said. I pulled out my phone and handed it to Ashley, telling her which album to open. The picture I was looking for showed Brian holding a large fish. Sitting next to him was Steve, and Jo was standing on the other side of Brian with her left hand on Steve's right shoulder. What do you see in this picture? I asked. My God, she exclaimed. They look so much alike. They even have the same dimples. Yeah, I said. I noticed that too. Now, look at Jolene's left hand. What stands out in it? Ashley arranged the picture and enlarged it with her fingers. I don't see any rings, she said. That's right, I said. You'll never guess where they were. Ashley threw me a perplexed look. I led her over to the folder where Jessica's pictures were kept. Look over there until you see an ashtray, I said. Okay, I get it, she said. Magnify the picture and tell me what you see. Her eyes widened as she zoomed in on the image. Is that what I think it is? She asked. I nodded. Yes, the same ring I put on her finger when I married her, along with my great-grandmother's wedding ring. And guess whose butts are in that tray? Let me guess, Steve's, she said. Oh, that's not all, I told her. That ashtray is not only in our bedroom, it's on my nightstand, which means Steve was in our bed, probably with Jolene. Ashley started to cry. How could she do that to you? And you say Jessica sent this? She asked. Yeah, I said. She often helped my mom clean the house, which meant cleaning and wiping down all the ashtrays. She saw it before they left and took a picture and sent it to me. She was very upset. I can imagine, Ashley said. Did she say anything to Jolene? Not that I know of. No, I wrote her back and asked her not to say anything to my mom. I also asked her to take the rings out, put them in her pocket, and mail them to me. Ashley laughed. I bet Jolene was tied up for that, she said. Yeah, Jessica has been acting like a real trooper this whole time. She did everything I asked, but Jolene was going crazy trying to find those rings. She even invited Steve over to help her search. They went through the garbage, opened siphons under sinks, that sort of thing. Too bad I wasn't around to record it. So what did you do? Ashley asked. My course ended on Friday afternoon, so I went straight away and came home on Saturday night. Jolene met me on the street crying because she had lost her grandmother's ring. She was completely out of it. I asked all the usual questions. Did you look everywhere? Did you put it on the sink? And so on. She kept insisting that she had looked everywhere. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled them out. I thought she was going to faint. How did you get them? She asked. I simply said a trusted friend found them and mailed them to me. I didn't mention Jessica's because I figured she'd tear it apart. I just told her, don't put them in the ashtray the next time Steve comes over. That was priceless. Her eyes got as big as saucers, and she started crying, telling me all the usual crap about loving me. Oh, I'm sorry, I said, seeing the look on Ashley's face. I didn't mean to swear. That's all right, she said. I've heard and said much worse, believe me. So tell me, what did you do then? Well, I pretty much knew then that it was over between us, I said. I didn't have any real evidence of them cheating, no pictures or anything like that. I decided to start investigating and get everything ready. The first thing I wanted to do was to take DNA tests. I needed to find out if these were my children. I also purchased some surveillance equipment from our store, high-definition motion-activated cameras, voice-activated audio recorders, everything I needed. I even bugged our cell phone. Everything was recorded on my home server and backed up to the cloud. I waited until she left to go shopping and installed it all. The DNA test was pretty easy to do. One of our clients in Dallas is a lab that does this kind of testing, and they provided me with everything I needed. I took samples from the kids, asking them not to say anything to their mother. I took my own sample and waited for the next Sunday when Steve came in, as usual. He fell asleep in the chair he always sat in, so swabbing his cheek was pretty easy. It took me a week to get the results because I had the lab mail them to the store. The test showed that there was a 99.9% probability that Steve was the father of both children, which meant that he and Jolene had been at it for at least 16 years, if not longer. "And all this time, you never guessed a thing?" asked Ashley. "No, not the slightest clue," I replied. "I'm sure if I'd sat down and analyzed everything carefully, I might have guessed. But that's the thing, she'd never given me any reason to question her fidelity before. Our sex life had always been on the up and up, even after we had kids. So I waited for other evidence to come forward, and it didn't take long. A week after I installed all the equipment, I received the first video evidence. I ended up going to Oklahoma City to set up the server and knew I'd be there for a couple of days. The kids were at my parents' house, so Jolene was on her own. Shortly after I left, she called Steve and arranged for him to come over. I called from my hotel in Oklahoma City and spoke to her briefly, just to let her know I was there for her. She said she loved me, but by that time, I didn't care anymore. After that call, I logged into my home server and waited. Sure enough, around 9 o'clock that night, they were in our bed, doing the dirty deed. Naturally, he didn't use a condom, which really annoyed me. Worse than watching the two of them roar like animals was what I heard them say, I muttered. "What was that?" asked Ashley. "Wait a minute," I said. "I have to turn onto this road, then it's another 30 minutes. I had to concentrate on this stretch of road. It was getting dark, and there were no lights, no guardrails, and no white lines marking the sides of the road. Anyone who wasn't looking carefully could easily end up in a ditch or worse. It was also near where Steve's drug-dealing buddies were operating. Most of them had been arrested or stopped after Steve's death, but I was always on the lookout. A couple of times, I had to replace the windshield when it got knocked out. There was also a lot of wildlife, mostly armadillos and deer. I flicked on the high beam and turned on the light bar on the roof of the cab. Then I turned on the police scanner and CB radio and pulled my gun out of the glove compartment. I wasn't going to take any chances. Finally, we got to my house, and Ashley noticed a DSS car parked in the driveway. "Who is it?" she asked. "Defense," I said. "They've been watching this place since Steve's arrest. Some of his buddies thought they could burn the place down in retaliation, but we stopped them. It's cold." I patted the pistol in its holster. She realized what I meant. "Are we going to be safe here?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "We have round-the-clock security. DSS is also keeping an eye on my family and kids. I think most of Steve's buddies are already locked up, but we're not going to take any chances. Hell, they had to lay off almost the entire sheriff's department. Let's go check it out, and I'll introduce you." After pulling into the garage, Ashley and I got out of the car and walked over to the patrol car. The police officer got out of the car and approached us. "Bill Jennings," he asked. "I thought you were all in Dallas for the trial." We shook hands. "The trial just went to the jury this afternoon. By the way, this is Ashley Mars, a reporter from the Austin Statesman. She'll be with me this weekend gathering information on Steve for an article," I said, nodding to her. He touched the tip of his gray Stetson. "Nice to meet you, ma'am," he said, smiling. He looked at me again. "Things have been quiet so far since the Rangers took the last gang out of here. But who knows? My replacement will show up soon." "Thank you," I said. We shook hands and parted ways. "Have a good night," he said as we headed for the door. "I will," I said. "You too." I set the coffee pot down and gave Ashley a tour of the house as we walked inside. The original house was built in 1866 by William Bryan Jennings after he returned from fighting for the Confederacy in the Civil War. Since then, the house has been expanded, remodeled, and modernized many times, but there are still a few places to see the original 150-year-old structure. Today, the house has 5 bedrooms on 2 floors and a 3-car garage with a covered porch. The house had a bedroom for each of the 2 kids, a master bedroom, one room converted into a place for Jolene's sewing and needlework, and another room set up as a playroom/TV room for the kids. I suggested Ashley sleep in the master bedroom since it was the only one with a bathroom, and I figured she would appreciate the privacy. I, on the other hand, could sleep on the futon in my den office downstairs, as I had been doing since I became convinced of Jolene's infidelity. Ashley, however, wouldn't hear of it. "Nonsense," she said. "This bed is big enough for 4 people. There's plenty of room, and we're both adults who can control ourselves." That threw me off balance. "Okay, if you say so," I said. She smiled and led me down the stairs. "You have a story to tell me, so let's get to it," she said. "Let me call the kids first so they know we'll be there tomorrow," I said. I called my parents' house, talked to my dad, then to the kids. They were excited to see Ashley, and we agreed that we would be there for lunch. I grabbed my coffee and headed into the living room. As I put the cups down, I found that I had a stack of DVDs. I grabbed them from the study where I kept them under lock and key. "That should help a lot," I said. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God, how many videos do you have?" she asked. "Quite a few, actually," I said. "Some of it is from here at home, some of it is from the security cameras in my office. I've also scanned all the documents, and I have a whole bunch of photos and audio recordings. So, everything I have is here, and I have some copies just in case." I pulled out the disc, confirmed it was the one, and put it in the DVD player. "Let me warn you that it's very graphic," I said. "I'm ready," she said. I reminded her that this particular DVD confirmed my suspicions. I also reminded her to listen carefully to what it was about. I pressed play, and the clip started. Jolene walked into the bedroom, followed by Steve. Jolene took off her rings and tossed them into the ashtray on my nightstand. Steve, smiling, put out his cigarette on them. "To hell with him and his great-grandmother's ring," Jolene said. Steve laughed. Ashley grimaced, tears welling up in her eyes. Eventually, they started having fun. Ashley covered her eyes. Apparently, it was too much for her. I fast-forwarded through the most graphic parts, and Ashley seemed to appreciate the gesture. "It'll take about an hour," I said. It was bad enough as it was, but the pillow talk afterward is a real buzzkill. "Thank you for letting all of this pass by," Ashley said. "It's one thing to hear that someone you love and care about is cheating, it's quite another to watch it happen." They lay on their backs and smoked a cigarette. Steve pounced on Jolene's rings again. Jolene turned on her side, facing Steve. "I'm pregnant again, baby." "Looks like you're going to be a daddy again," she said. Steve frowned. "Damn it, didn't you take your pills?" he asked. "Yeah, I might have missed a day or 2, but that was pretty much it." "Why can't you use a condom?" she said. "You know the rules, no rubber bands." "I guess you'll have to get another abortion, either that or convince him it's his baby." "I can't have another abortion, Steve," she said. "I've already had 3, and the last one almost killed me. I was so sick I ended up in the emergency room. Besides, you know Deep Pocket had a vasectomy after Jessica was born. It was your idea to make sure he didn't get me pregnant." "Well, what do you want to do?" asked Steve. "I want to go away and marry you," she said. "That's all I've ever wanted, and I think Bill's got us figured out anyway. I told you I'm not the marrying kind. Besides, a family could complicate things for me, and I like what I have now. Bill works and pays, and I get paid," he said. "And don't worry about him knowing anything. Hell, he's so damn stupid we could have fun right in front of him, and he wouldn't realize a thing. Why don't you just do to him what you do to other guys?" she said. Well, those guys were illegals anyway. No one would have missed them. Besides, who's going to cry over some scumbag drug dealers being in the country illegally? Heck, by getting rid of those guys, I probably secured half the voters. It's one thing to put a bullet in the head of an unknown illegal alien, it's another thing to do it to a respected member of society. Maybe you can have an accident, Jolene said. It wouldn't be the first time, and you know people die driving down Indian Trail all the time. People who do that are usually commuters looking for scenery, and they don't know the road like he does. We might be able to do something about it, but we won't get away from him just yet. Maybe we can find something that will incapacitate him gradually. Poison, for instance. Let's think about it for a while before we come up with a plan. Eventually, we will have to get rid of him, but let's do it right and at the right time. Maybe after the kids are out of the house. That way, you get his insurance and part of his business. In the meantime, go to the new clinic in Abilene. They'll take better care of you than those quacks you went to last time. I'll keep an eye on Billy Boy. If it looks like he's going to do something stupid like go to a lawyer, I'll talk to him a little and bring him up to speed, okay? Jolene nodded. Okay, baby, I'll do it. You're the man, she said, kissing his face. Now let's get on with it, she said, and the coupling started all over again. I stopped the video. Ashley shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I hate that woman, she said, and you lived with her for 17 years. Please tell me you went to a lawyer after that. I went to see a lawyer, I said, beginning my narrative. It was a very eventful day. Let me tell you about it. I actually went to see a lawyer, as I had told Ashley. I had made an appointment with Alan Jackson, the attorney who had taken care of all of our family's business and personal legal needs over the years. What I learned at that appointment cut me to the bone. I remembered my visit to Alan's office. After the initial greetings, I got straight to the point, showing him some of the evidence I had, including the DNA report and the videotape of Jolene's affair with Steve. Alan explained what I could expect. Although Texas is a community property state, a divorce can be granted based on adultery or cruelty. While adultery is not a crime in Texas, it can affect a judge's decision in the distribution of property and alimony. It can also be used in civil litigation. But Alan told me the biggest problem I faced was not the law. Legally, he said, I had a win-win case. The problem, he added, was Steve. Listen, Bill, he said to me. Steve runs this county with an iron fist. He owns the sheriff's department, not to mention every judge in the county. And in Texas, you have to file a lawsuit in the county where you've lived for the last 90 days. Frankly, I don't think there's a judge in that county that will even hear your case. Besides, Jolene's pregnancy could delay the process. Texas courts won't finalize a divorce until the baby is born. It doesn't matter who the father of the child is. This is so that any final child support orders can be taken into consideration. One last thing, Bill, Alan continued. Steve has informed me that you may want to divorce Jolene. He made it clear that we are to inform him of any attempts to start divorce proceedings. Wait a minute, I said. Are you saying that Steve ordered you to violate attorney-client privilege and maybe even break the law by refusing to report a crime? Alan nodded his head. I'm afraid so, Bill. I don't like it one bit, but I have no desire to end up in a shallow grave on Indian Trail, if you know what I mean. You have no idea what you're up against. I'm sorry, Bill, Alan continued. I really have no choice. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm sorry too, Alan. I guess I don't have a choice either. You're fired right now. I need all of the family and business files along with any backups you might have, and I want them now, I said. I guess that would be your answer, he said, realizing that I had given him a way out. One more thing, he said, I'm so sorry. I thought you and him were friends. Is there no way you can get over this thing with Jolene, for the sake of the kids? Would you be able to stand not being known to be a cuckold for 17 years? I asked him. I don't think so, he said. Let me help you get those files out. It's the least I can do. He picked up the boxes of documents while I closed my briefcase and walked with me to the truck. Once there, he looked around before he spoke again. Call those people I listed in the paper I gave you, Bill. I didn't want to say anything in the office just in case, but the authorities are very interested in some of Steve's actions. No time to waste, please, he said. As far as I know, Steve is keeping tabs on you again. I'm sorry about that. Maybe after this is over, we can get together and work things out. I shook his hand. Thank you, Alan. I understand. We'll be in touch. I went back to the office, thinking over everything Alan had said. I wasn't too worried about firing Alan, since I knew my father would support my decision. I was more concerned about Steve and what he or his cronies might do to the family. I called the numbers Alan had given me and made an appointment with each of the three men mentioned. One was an expensive, high-ranking family law attorney with a well-deserved reputation as a blood-sucking shark. Another was a state's attorney, and the third was a senior Texas Ranger officer. All of them were located in Dallas. I talked to my dad and told him I fired Alan as our lawyer. He was fine with it. Why the hell did you do that? He asked. I explained what Alan had told me and then showed him the DNA and video evidence I had presented to Alan. His tone changed significantly. Oh damn, he said. I suspected Steve was a snake, but I didn't think so much. You've got to get the kids out of the house. There's no telling what they'll do. I agreed, but wondered what excuse I could use. My father already had a plan. When do you have appointments in Dallas? He asked. I told him I had an appointment for tomorrow. Okay, tell Jolene that I'm sending you to Fo to survey the area, and you may be gone for a few days. I'm going home with you just in case. Have the kids pack up and stay with us. Hopefully, that will get them off the radar for a while, he said. Are you planning on telling the kids about this? I have to, Dad. They deserve to know the truth, I said. I won't scold their mom, but they're old enough to make their own decisions. Okay, son. You do what you think is right, and your mom and I will support you, he said. I called Brian's cell phone and explained that he and Jessica would be staying with his grandparents starting today. What's going on, Dad? He asked. I'll tell you later. Just make sure both you and your sister are home right after school, I said. Grandpa will pick you up from there. Okay, Dad. We'll be there, he said. Love you guys. I could almost hear his face turn red with embarrassment. I love you too, Daddy, he whispered. A few minutes later, I got a message from my secretary. Bill, Steve Jenkins is here to see you, she said. I pulled my gun out of its holster and placed it on the desk for easy retrieval, turned on the VCR to capture the meeting, and told the secretary to send him in and let my father know he was here. Steve walked into the office like he owned the place and immediately saw the 9mm pistol on my desk. Not a bad piece of equipment you've got, he said. Didn't know computer geeks used guns. What do you want, Steve? I asked, straight to the point. Okay, look. I know you went to see Alan Jackson today, he said. So what's in it for you? I asked. If you're thinking of divorcing Jolene, forget it, he said. I don't care if you know about her and me, but I'll be damned if I'm going to let you drag me through the mud in court. Tell me, Steve. Why? I thought we were friends. Why did you and Jolene do that? How long did it last? I asked. How long? He asked. That's a good one. You're going to like this. We actually started back during prom. You remember, don't you? Ashley was my date, but Jolene and I got away for a while and got into it. You were dancing with Ashley when we got back, remember? Hell, we were all 18 at the time, so we weren't doing anything illegal. Then we got back together when you were at Quantico. Remember when I messed up my knee at Pendleton? We did that quite a bit until you came back. Jolene was on birth control, but I guess she forgot to take it the day you got married, he said. You were my best man, I said. I was hers too. I have to admit I really enjoyed watching her walk down the aisle. She was so beautiful. And guess what? 9 months later, Brian was born, he said. Well, isn't that a kick in the butt? Of course, we weren't together until you brought her home on vacation. That was just before you went to Okinawa. Yeah, Jolene and I had a good time. Spent almost every night together while you were there. She got pregnant about 6 months later and had an abortion. Didn't want you coming home with a pregnant wife. Hell, I even slept with her the day your plane landed. And guess what? 9 months later, Jessica showed up, he said. By the way, it was my idea to have Jolene make you get a vasectomy. We didn't want her to have any of your children. Thought it would be too complicated to keep track of who was born to whom. Jolene screwed up a couple of times over the years, and she had to go to a aborter. Good thing your insurance covers abortions. We were doing great all these years until you decided to wise up. You couldn't just leave things the way they were. Now, you had to become outraged and righteous. That's how it's going to be now that you know about us. There's no need to divorce and hide it. From now on, I'll come to you any time of the day or night. And when I'm there, I'll play with Jolene wherever I want. And when I am there, you will remember that I am the master of the house. You will do what I say, when I say, and how I say. And if you get any ideas in your head about stopping me, think of the kids. I wouldn't want anything bad to happen to them, he said. You bastard, I said. You touch one hair on those kids, and I'll put you down like a rabid dog. And I don't care if it's the last thing I do in my life. Talk all you want, Asko, Steve said. Just remember who's in charge around here. Hell, I own this county. I own the sheriff's department. I own every goddamn judge in the courthouse. And now I own you. You play ball, you'll be all right. You step out of line, and everything will be all right for you and for the kids. Would you hurt your own children? I asked. What happened to you? I asked. I've grown up, Steve said. And you better grow up too, Cookie. I'll see you around. Steve walked out of the office, and I stopped the tape. I burned it to DVD, sent a copy of the video to my dad and my contacts in Dallas, and called my dad. Dad, check your mail. We better move right now, I said. He just threatened me and the kids. Okay, my father said. Let me make the call. Call Brian and have him pick up Jess and come to my house. Let the school know, and I'll meet you at the house. I think it's time to evict your wife. I agreed and called the school, informing them that under no circumstances should my wife or Steve Jenkins pick up the children or even be in the building, explaining that it could be a matter of life and death. I also informed them that the children must leave immediately. I called Brian and told him to pick up Jess immediately and drive directly to his grandfather's house, no questions asked. I'll talk about you kids later today, I promise, I told him. And under no circumstances have any contact with your mother or Steve. This is very important. Do you understand? Yeah, Dad, I got it, he replied. What's going on? He asked. There's no time to explain now, son. Just do as I say, okay? Okay, Dad, he said. I grabbed my gun, the DVD I had just burned, walked out of the office, and jumped in my truck. I knew my dad would be on his way soon, so I didn't wait. If he said he was going to be somewhere, then he would be. I pulled out and headed home. About 15 minutes later, I pulled up in front of my house. I didn't see Steve's truck, but Jolene's car was there. Oh good, I knew my dad would be here soon. I walked into the house, looking around for Steve or anyone else who might be waiting to hurt me. I kept my right hand on my holstered pistol. I didn't see or hear anyone at first. I took an uncertain step into the house. Jolene, you're home early, she said. Did something happen? I looked at her, at first saying nothing. Is Steve or anyone else here? I asked. Why would Steve be here? She replied. I think you know why. Steve is here, maybe to get himself an afternoon hookup or to set up my murder, I said. Jolene's eyes widened, and she brought her hand up to her mouth. Yes, Jolene, I know, I said. Oh my God, she said. I'm so sorry. Let me show you what your lover just told me, and then I'll give you 30 seconds to grab your stuff and get out of my house, I said. I put the DVD in the player, turned on the TV, and pressed play on the remote. I watched Jolene's reaction to Steve's confession and his threat. Bill, it's not what you think, she said. Please let me explain. Steve just said some nasty things. We can work things out. Are you kidding me? You conspired with Steve to cuckold me from the beginning, then you conspired with him to deny me, and then you conspired with Steve to kill me. What the hell kind of people are you? Now take your stuff and get the hell out of here, now, goddammit. I never raised my voice at her, but she was clearly frightened. I reached out, took her left hand, and pulled the rings off of it. I put my grandmother's ring in my pocket, took off mine, and slipped it into her hand. Eat it, I growled. Bill, please don't do this to me. I'm so sorry, she wheezed through her tears. Yeah, you're sorry, all right. You're a sorry excuse for a wife. Now get out of here. I grabbed her purse, threw it at her, and it hit her in the chest. She rushed to the door. Move, damn it, I said. I was tempted to kick her ass, but I'd been raised never to hit a woman. We walked outside and went to her car. She turned to me as she opened the door. Where will I go? She asked, crying. First of all, I said, stop your damn tears. You got what you wanted. Second of all, I don't care. Go to Steve, go to your mother's apartment, or better yet, go to hell. Having said that, I noticed 2 cars pull up to the driveway. Dad's truck pulled up first, followed by Steve's. Jolene instantly stopped crying and smirked at me. Now we'll see who has to go, baby, she said, wryly. It would be so much easier if you just cooperate with us. Are you really going to do that? I asked. In a heartbeat, she said. Dad swung his truck around to block Steve's access to the house and stopped. Steve slammed on the brakes, missing his father's truck by only a couple of feet. Steve jumped out of the car, my dad did too. He pulled out his 12-gauge shotgun, loaded a round, and pointed it at Steve. What the hell are you doing, Jennings? Steve yelled. I'm following a restraining order, my father said. What kind of restraining order? Asked Steve. The one against you and your lover. The one that says you two must stay 500 feet away from my family on our property, Dad said. And believe me, I'd like nothing more than to hurt you. So get in your truck and get out of here. Steve wasn't used to being talked to like that, so he stopped moving forward. 2 cars with flashing lights pulled into the driveway and stopped behind Steve's truck. 4 state highway patrol officers got out of them with their pistols at the ready. We'll take it from here, Mr. Jennings, one of the officers said as he approached Steve. Dad lowered his gun as the officer handed Steve a restraining order. Is that her? He asked, nodding his head toward Jolene. Dad shook his head. The officer walked over to Jolene and me and handed her the paper. Mrs. Jennings, you have been served with an order requiring you to stay 500 feet away from any member of the Jennings family and any property under the control of the Jennings Historic Family Foundation, which includes this house, he said. If you refuse to obey this order, you will be taken into custody. Do you understand? Yes, I know, Jolene said quietly. Excuse me, officer, I said as he started to turn away. He stopped and looked at me. Yes, Mr. Jennings, he asked. I'd appreciate it if you'd take Jolene and Mr. Jenkins into custody. I said, and why would I do that? He asked. I hit the play button so they could hear the threat Jolene had just made to me and the kids. Jolene looked like she was about to cry. The officer gave her a hard look before pulling out the handcuffs. "Miss Jennings, you are under arrest. Please turn around and put your hands behind your back," he said. After handcuffing Jolene and reading her Miranda rights, he radioed another officer and ordered him to arrest Steve. "You're going to pay for this," Jolene said as she was led away in handcuffs. "You're all going to pay." By this time, another car had pulled into the driveway. A van from a local TV station stopped, and a reporter followed by a camera crew walked up the driveway. While Steve was being arrested, they managed to get a report on his arrest that made the evening news. Steve was, to put it mildly, displeased. "God damn it. Do you know who I am?" he asked the officer handcuffing him. "Yeah, I know," the officer said, "and frankly, I don't care. You're under arrest anyway." "I'll get your badge for that," shouted the red-faced Steve. "I realized I should have mentioned their plot to kill me, but I didn't have that evidence with me." Some of it was still in the DVD player in the house, and events were moving pretty fast. Nevertheless, I knew that my contacts in Dallas had the evidence and were working on the charges. The news van backed up and shifted so the patrol cars could pull out of the driveway. The reporter and her cameraman came toward me, followed by my father. "Mr. Jennings, could you explain why Commissioner Jenkins was just arrested?" she asked. "Yes, I can," I said. "As far as I know, making death threats is still a crime, and even popular politicians like Steve and his married girlfriend are covered by the law. Now, if you don't mind, I've got kids to take care of." I stepped back, and my father joined me, leaving the reporter and her cameraman in shock. The voters in our district had treated Steve well, and I knew that his reputation as a man who espoused family values had just taken a major hit. Unfortunately, the voters didn't know Steve the way I knew him, but I'll make sure they find out. My next stop was my parents' house, where I explained everything to those who were left of my family. I hated telling my children that the man they knew as Uncle Steve was actually their biological father, but I felt I had to tell them the truth. At first, they didn't want to believe it, but I had the DNA test results to prove it. "I don't care what that piece of paper says," Jessica said. "You're my father, and you always will be."